Hey folks, welcome to Breakdown, the Poet and the Poems, a show where a poet helps us to break down poetry as inspiration and motivation for our everyday lives. My name is Tamara J. Madison and I am your host. And I am honored to share with you poet Randall Horton and his book number 289128. Talking about inspiration and motivation, a phoenix rising from the ashes, poetry as powerful transformation. This brother went from the incarceration system to being a poet and now a professor and scholar and so many other things. You gotta see this one. So you know how we do. Go ahead, grab your coffee, tea, snack, whatever you need. Subscribe, like, share, comment. Show the poet some love, and join us for the next breakdown. All right, so welcome, Randall Horton. Thank you so much for coming to have a conversation with me on Breakdown, the Poet and the Poems. I really, really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate making an appearance on the Breakdown. How about that?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
We are here to discuss poems number 289128 by Randall Gavin Horton. And usually to start off, what I do is like the official description of the book that I find online. And then I want to share with you what my description of the book would be. And then we'll jump into some of the poems, okay?
Yeah, fine.
All right, so for those of you who are watching, here is the official description of the book. Though number 289128 refuses to be defined as a felon, this collection viscerally details the dehumanizing effects of prison, which linger long after release. It also illuminates the ways in which we all are relegated to cells or boundaries, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. And that's just an excerpt that I took from the description that I thought would be appropriate for Breakdown. And so I want to share with you my personal blurb for the book. In number 289128, Randall Horton shines light on a few of the weakening cracks and violent tears of our society. He fiercely, though lovingly, reminds us how very fragile our humanity is. Yeah?
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's it. How about that?
Okay. All right. So I would like to ask you, in hindsight, this is hindsight. This is after the whole editing madness project and all of that. How
Right.
would you describe this book?
After all of I guess the process of going through it, I think for me it's a book that sort of investigates the criminal justice system through my own personal narrative, and this seeks to, like as you say, shine a light on those who live often beneath life and literature, right? The invisible ones, the ones that was never supposed to have been. And that whole existence. And so for me, the book is definitely a conversation with society as we know it today. The one that is sort of discussing criminal justice issues and prison reform and the abolition of prisons and what is it that we do with the returning citizen and how do we talk about these things. So for me, as someone who was an active participant in that life, I wanted to talk about the things that I had experienced and I knew to be true within the confines of containment, which we call prison. So, yeah.
So for those people who are watching, who have no idea who Mr. Horton is, He is a badass poet. He made me pick up a dictionary and do all kinds of studying while I was reading this book. He is a professor at the University of New Haven, yes?
Yes. Yes.
And he is a fierce scholar as well as an advocate in his work. And then he's like the brother next door. Where you from?
I'm from Birmingham, Alabama.
Okay, so then he's also like the brother next door, and all of that shows up in your poetry.
Right.
So one of the things that this show is about is having a conversation about what poetry has to do with real everyday people, which you already started talking about. So I want to jump into one of the poems. Sorry, this not that poem. So would you read that for us, please?
Yeah.
So I could just sit here and be in awe and listen. And
No, not a problem. Not a problem. All right. So 289128, property of the state. Sorry, this is not their poem. Raised block flower and plant bed. Peonies, gardenias, poinsettias, plus a yellow orb slow rising over an endless golden scape. Darting through uncluttered space, cardinals, thrushes, sparrows, blue air fragrant with lavender, washing brain matter into virtue. If only I could pastel alphabets onto a canvas of thistledown, yes, deceit comes to mind. A lie, traitor, turncoat, recreant, backstabber, here I would be gut shanked a million times. This is not that poem, nor am I that poet to hold your hand, or erase not whole screams, blood on the cement floor, or suicide is another form of escape. No, 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 yes, I do promise. The evil, ugly humans inflict on each other to themselves, how time is malice as death, inflaming pupils with spite, indistinguishable is set free. Forgive state poet 289128 for not scribbling illusions of trickery, as if time as hell could be captured by stanzas, alliteration, or slant rhyme.
Okay, so I jotted these questions down on this particular poem. The first thing I want to ask you is what is that poet poem that holds your hand?
Well, it's also sort of a slice to poetry in terms of sometimes you got to give the nice and serene and, metaphorical image to make everybody feel good about the poem or the language within the poem. And the poet and the poem goes part and parcel in terms of they're connected to each other. What it's getting at is like, I'm not going to be the one that holds your hand to give you the sugar-coated version of what incarceration looks like. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give you the evil, ugly, the humans inflict on themselves to each other. The truth, something, the beauty the beauty that's in the truth. So, when we talk about poetry, sometimes I think that sort of becomes a topic of like, how do I broach or approach a subject? And I think sometimes some things need to be said a little bit plainly, or a little bit more succinctly, or a little bit more directly, or a little bit more with a slant of making you think about what it is that you sort of reading, right? All of those things come into play. And so I don't want to be the poet to sort of like make it easy for you and to sugarcoat it for you and to hold your hand as we go through this horrible experience.
You didn't make it easy for me.
Right.
It was not easy for me because I'm sitting here and I'm reading and I'm like, what am I going to do with this? Like, how am I going to talk to him about this? Mm. And that was the answer, is to let him know immediately, right? That I don't know what to do with this.
Right.
I see like the beauty in it and I see the terror in it.
Right.
And I see the tender in it at the same time. And it's in a man's language.
Right.
Because you don't take like the cool little scenic route, like to get there. You're like a blazing blazing arrow with fire at the tip that goes directly to the bullseye.
It's almost a satirical. You start off with the whole idea of what that poem or that poem, might look like. This whole flowery existence, and playing on the image. I think I always play back. I always go back to. I was at the Gwendolyn Brooks conference one year. I saw Amir Baraka was being interviewed, and they was talking to him about his experience in the Black Arts Movement, and while he was writing the poem that he was writing, and he's like, man, I couldn't see about how writing a poem about how my hand itched when people were dying, and so I've always thought about that in terms of like the poems that I write sometimes, or the intention of the poem, or what is the purpose of the poem in the larger world. I think all of those things play a part, even though the poem is a personal experience. It's one-on-one, you and the poem, right? But at some point it's going to have a life of its own. If it's, that's your intent is to put it in the world, it's going to have a life of its own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you do put folk in the poem, because that was one of the things that I was noticing, like all of the little teeny tiny details about riding on the subway train or little bitty cracks in the cell, all of these little details that you have. And I was like, damn, does he have to explain every single detail? And I realized the reason why it was making me uncomfortable, it was because it was putting me in that space. You are so detailed that I end up being in the cell with you, right? And I don't mean at all to belittle the experience, but I'm saying that it's consuming in that kind of way, which shows your effectiveness as a writer and your attention to detail.
Thank you.
So I want to go to page 28, How to Become the Invisible Man.
Yeah.
Yeah. You read that for me? And while we're turning to that page, I want to just let folks know that some people may not have heard of the book, The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison.
Right.
So I want to mention that because somebody might want to look that up as well. Would you read this one for us?
289128, Property of the State, How to Become the Invisible Man. Names must be on the list, but no one will visit today, including children over 12. Friends dissipated first at Roxbury, weekends are fixed, 10 to 11 a.m. and 12 to 2:30 p.m. Weekends depend on the inmate's number. From DC, take I-270 north, though the cutoff time stays at 2, a visit might be miraculous. But drive far, far west, get off as if someone actually might, at the Sharpsburg exit, Route 65. Since girlfriend never wrote she would not proceed 1 mile or approach any access road. After the transfer from county, contemplate loneliness and why family block every collect call. Please follow the signs. Believe a whole body can vanish. Yeah, that was an important poem to write too, though, for the book. Just because of the idea, they say, if prison, the prison structure, or the prison system is a sort of like this invisible structure, then people go inside that invisible structure and disappear all the time because of they're subject to another life now with a total different set of social orders, rules, regulations, and a way of existence that outside doesn't exist anymore. And little bit by little bit, the connections between, the outside world are sort of like, are lost. And it goes with the friends, the girlfriends, and trying to get a visit to come see you. All of those things, take a lot of energy, a lot of time. And I think for me, it became evident that the life that I lived prior to incarceration, was a life that I thought I had family and friends, and I realized that those weren't my family and friends because they didn't come. Not one of them came to visit me.
Not one?
No, I didn't get a visit. No. I mean, no, I didn't. I got a visit from my mother in county before I went upstate. She came to DC. But I was in Hagerstown, Maryland, and I didn't get a visit. It was easy. It was the time I had, and my family was in Alabama. I was in D.C. for a long time, and so my family was in Alabama, and it didn't make sense for them to fly all the way up there to come see me when they could send money so I could have the basic necessities that you kind of need in prison through commissary. So no, there and so the people that hung out with in D.C. and all that. I never got a visit from them. I mean, they were out there still doing wrong. There's a thing, like people are not going to come visit you when they're actively involved in doing wrong. So they're just not. I mean, they're just not. And so I think, but that's sort of one of the rules you learn, but I think it hits home when you're in there and you're trying to get a call and you want to go see, you want to see somebody. But yeah, the visit was real. Like I never got one of those. So, but yeah, the Invisible Man is I'm kind of interested in the ways in which invisibility sort of affects our lives, and especially Black boys. And so for me, my next project, which is a memoir through essays, begins with a whole meditation on 155th and Riverside in New York City with the Invisible Man statue. There's a statue there. That's the protagonist. It's a statue that's in homage to Ralph Ellison's character in the novel. Seriously, it's like the statue cut out. It's like an invisible man. And so when I was working on my next memoir, I used to go there and write when I was staying in New York. I moved to Jersey now. And it was a thing where I tried to sort of relate a lot of the things in which I was going through in life to the protagonist in Invisible Man, from racism to like all that, the little bit of subtle things. It was important for me to put that in there, the Invisible Man. Just always, because if you pay attention closely, there's a lot of nods to writers within that book. Chester Himes, I got Mitchell Jackson in there. I got Robert Hayden, Miguel Pinheiro. It's a few people, right? Ethers Knight. And so the Black folk, W.B. Du Bois. So there's that part of it too. See, a lot of those poems, some of those poems do have like a literary context to them as well. And so they're playing off other writers that I'm in conversation with. Perfect example we talked about earlier about being in conversation with writers. I'm in conversation with every last one of those writers in this book, even though all of them wasn't incarcerated or anything like that. It's the little subtle things in their work that I found in common, and was able to sort of tie those into my project. And thus we became to have this sort of conversation. Yeah.
So do you think that having that conversation with them, that kept you from being completely disappearing and being invisible? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So it's important for me to put that in there because of, the invisibility of people of color within literature already. So I'm always thinking about that. And how do I highlight, how do I accentuate those things that have been erased for so long and, not talked about for so long? How do I put those front and center and make those prominent?
Mm-hmm. And put their existence front and center, not their invisibility.
Right, exactly.
Because sometimes we write more about the invisibility than we do about the actual existence and sustenance of us sometimes. So that was one of the things that I was planning on asking you later, but I think now's the perfect time. Do you think that poetry saved your life?
Yeah, it's a cliche, but it damn sure did. I mean, of course, it just did. I mean, I don't necessarily know if I take this road coming out of prison, if I hadn't been introduced to poetry and started that whole narrative. Because when I got out of prison and went back to school and said I'm going to try to be a poet, I didn't know what that meant. Mm-hmm. I didn't know. I knew that I know people wrote and I knew that, there were writing communities and all those things. But I didn't know what that meant in terms of how can I turn my life around and make my life better. The only thing I knew was it made me feel good. That's the only thing I had to go on, that it made me feel like I was a better human being. And so that was the impetus to sort of like make me continue on. And that's why I say, when you say the change, the shit that saved one's life, change, the most important thing, it changed my life in order to save it, that I was able to put me in different positions to do other things. I mean, I can remember when I was going to after I came out of prison and went back to DC, got my bachelor's degree, and I was going to go to Chicago State. And I was telling my parents at the time, this was a while back, and because they were very supportive, and they was like, I'm going to go get a master's degree in poetry. Like, well, what are you going to do with that?
Right.
Like, I don't know what I'm going to do with it right now, but I know that it's taking me on the path and the journey, and I'm not going to turn my back on the journey. And so I didn't know. But yeah, I mean, so with all of those things, and so, I was able to go to, get degrees, get my master's and my PhD. I was able to publish some books. None of those things happen, if I don't necessarily sit up, if I'm not in a jail addiction services program in county jail, and I have to begin to start writing these things that sort of make me tick, and in the process of that, I get befriended by a lady who works in Health and Human Services, who ran one of the programs there, and told me to keep on writing. She thought I had something, I had talent. I don't know what that meant at the time, but she said I could write. And no one ever told me that I could write, right? And she made me promise that when I went upstate to start doing my time, because she called me in the office, that I would never stop writing. So, these things along the way, they kind of made me feel good about myself. So that, and I think when I got to prison, it was a way of sort of to manage time, think about reading, to think about writing, and just trying to think about what that meant. So I go back to the county jail to see if I can have my sentence commuted. And I go back to the same block that I've been staying in, and the jail addiction services block. And then one night, one of the social workers come in and put us in a tape of Deaf Poetry Jam, right? And so there's this and so I see the performance of Patricia Smith, and who's like a force or a power within herself. And she's like this little 5'6", but she starts the poem like, they call me skinhead, and I got my own beauty. It is knife scrawl and sword jagged letters. It is in the way my eyes snap away from the obvious. And I remember sitting there listening to the poem like, how in the hell did she do that? How do poets, like, what did I just witness here? Like, I wasn't hip to like performance poetry, slams poetry. I ain't know nothing about none of that, man. I was on another world for real. Like, I was all in, invested in a whole nother life. And it, just wasn't what it was. And so she blew me away so much that night, because I've been writing, I've been falling in love with the language, and, I thought I knew what a poet was, but I didn't really know yet. Still, I'm trying to find out. And I see this video, and I can remember going back in my cell that night, man. I can remember clearly as a day. I got my yellow legal pad, and I just started writing, trying to figure out how I could do that. And I didn't succeed that night, but it sort of like lit a fire in me, man. I'm like, wow, is that what poetry can fucking do? Mm-hmm. It messed me up. It totally messed me up. That was the moment. And years later, man, she blurred my first book. I was in a workshop with her, and I remember just sitting there thinking about that moment. And here I am, taking a workshop. Like, so we have these moments, right? That's what the poet does. Your journey is that all these moments, and I was able to share that with her years later too. We talked about that, and they did a tribute to her, and I was able to like really share that whole story in that way, in which like you say, we have effects on people, but sometimes people don't know unless you tell them, like you say. And I think she just, I need to tell her that. And so, but I'm playing with house money. So yeah, it saved my life. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm playing with I don't supposed to be here. Like I don't say things for hyperbole or for dramatic effect. Many of those things like that. I promise you I don't. I'm just really trying to be truthful. Like I shouldn't be here too many times. I mean, I lived a whole other life that was really so far away from what I had grown up, was raised to do and be, and I just got lost in a whole different world, man. And I was enveloping, and I bought it hook, line, and sinker, and I took it all the way to the end. So they told me that they were going to take away my freedom, and that and then I had to look at myself in the mirror, like, is this how the story going to end? And I think for me, language, poetry gave me, that was the only out. That was the only thing I saw.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop you right there. First of all, when I ask you that, for me, it's not cliche at all. It's not cliche at all, because I honestly feel like I am a much kinder, gentler, loving woman because of poetry. I honestly feel like I could have been a Hellcat bitch on wheels in all kinds of ways, had it not been for the poetry in my life. And right. I think poetry helps me to live and not just survive. So that was what I meant by, do you believe that poetry had something to do with saving your life? Because you might have survived that experience, but you are living now with a certain kind of passion. So that was what I was thinking.
Right.
And I think, like, for me personally, the idea, when you are a young person and you start learning some of the truths about what's really going on in the world and some of the real history, and you're an earth-toned person and you find out about the raping and the pillaging and all kinds of facets of the word or what have you that has happened, to where you come from. You got to have some kind of way of navigating that matrix. And it's very easy to fall into an abyss of all kinds of things, right? So that's what I meant, because you are living now, not just surviving, you are living, and then you are even thriving in terms of what you do as an artist. And I want to bring this to your attention. I wrote something down while you were talking.
Okay.
You said, poetry was a journey. I'm not going to turn my back on the journey. There was a moment when you realized that. And I'm sitting here listening to you. I was like, oh, Randall don't even know. You're talking to a preacher's granddaughter.
Right.
My grandfather, my great-grandfather, my uncle, that's all on my mama's side. They were all pastors, right? Preachers.
Yeah.
And so I've heard a very similar story all of my life, having been raised in the church, about that moment when you get the calling.
Right. Yeah.
You don't have to say anything. Just sit with that for a minute. Don't try to brush over that. Don't try to brush over that. Right? For some of us, it is a calling. And it sounds to me like you caught the calling.
Yeah, I get the call.
And said yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've been, the call has been called many times before in my life, but it was only then that I heard it. Put it like that. Because there was a lot of people calling and trying to help that call and trying to, but you can't get it until you're ready. And then you know.
Right.
No. And that's what I'm saying. Like I knew there was a moment where, I'm ready now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm ready. I knew I was done when I was going back before the judge for my motion for reconsideration after I got my time in Maryland, and I had a hearing. They brought me from prison, and my father came from Birmingham. He was my character witness. It wasn't a trial, that was already over, but my motion, I was in a program. This program, man, this lady named Bonnie Boswell, who was well, she still works at the Department of Health and Human Services, and she's like a legend down in Montgomery County, Maryland. She's been an advocate for police, for prison reform for years and alternative to incarceration. So I came through Montgomery County in her program, and she took an interest in me, and she told me that once I got my time, that stay out of trouble, she was gonna bring me back before the judge and see if they could commute my sentence and send me to a program. Right. So I go up there and spend almost 4 years in prison upstate. And I go back, and my father came over from Birmingham to, like I said, do my character with it. So we're going through the whole process of like why should I be let out of prison? And of course the prosecuting attorney is like, Mr. Horton's had 39 years to get his life together. We see no reason why he should have any chance at rehabilitation. He's thrown all his life away, and he's not going. Man, he talked about me like a damn dog, for real. But then my father had to get up, and that was about, and so he talked to me. He held court for about 30 minutes. I ain't never seen nothing like it before in my life. My father is like a teacher, so he taught high school, taught for 30 years, taught, grade school all the way up to high school, but he's finished high school. And so proud guy from country Alabama, grew up in segregation, went to HBCU, owned his own business. So he's an interesting cat, right? And so he gets up and sort of like gives the judge, the biography, of me from when I was a little kid. You know what I'm saying? Like all the way from a little kid and all the way, all the promise I had or I could have been, the things I could do. And, so he went through this whole thing, man. It was like the most unreal thing I've ever seen in my life. And I'm sitting there looking at it and I'm feeling like shit. Like, wow, here's someone is like, all the people I talk about, they claim to your friends and your family, they don't come see you, but here's your real family coming to see you, coming to bat for you, right? And then, of course, he's going through the process, he's holding court. Man, everybody crying in the courtroom. I'm crying, my lawyer crying, everybody crying. The ladies in the gallery crying, man, the judge damn near crying. I'm like, oh, it was like the most unreal shit I've ever seen in my life, man. And he just like, he held court, and by the time he was through, man, it wasn't a dry eye in the whole courtroom. And the judge granted my motion. And she was like, if you come back before me decide anything but death, I'm gonna give you the whole book or whatever. But more so than that, man, the bailiff who took me back after the court hearing was over with, man, he's like, man, I've been with that judge about 30 years on the bench, man. She ain't never done nothing like that. He said, man, I don't know what's going on, but I know you got a blessing today. You need to understand. And so, but I understood. He didn't tell me I got it. Mm-hmm. She gave me another chance. But at the same time, my father broke down and cried, in such a way that I had never seen him cry like that in front of a person. And I sort of like was the one who did that. So when you say about it, when you're sure, but all of these things working in contact, I'm finding myself. But then this just was in there like, what are you doing? Is this what you really want right here? For the people who claim, who don't claim but actually love you, is this the love that you give back? So I had so it was easy. It was easy. All of those things, sort of like that moment, and it's like, yeah, man, this is what I'm gonna do. If I can just give me the chance, I'm not gonna look back. I'm gonna put everything I got into it, everything. So
hold on. So at that moment, that's the moment when you realize how precious you really are. That's that moment. And it was your father who was able to do that for you. Have you ever written about that moment?
Oh yeah. It's in my first book, man. It's in a Hook. The section's called Father Forgive Me.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't read that one. I don't read that in public. That's all I want to read, even today. Like, it's because it took me a while to even write it. But yeah, I wrote about it, and I've only read it once. I read it. My father, I did a reading at Alabama State when the book came out. And I went down to Alabama, and he rode with me from Birmingham to Montgomery to the college, and I read it then, and it took me everything to get through it. But I don't read that one because it's too much. It's still too emotional to think about, even years later. That moment right there, can't forget that one. And yeah, it took a minute. It took a long time for me to process that and really like write about it. That was a whole other process, but man.
So that, to me, there's a connection to that and some of the things that I was reading in your poems, because I was thinking again about how detailed you were about certain moments and how you called into, how do I want to say this? You took some of the quote unquote most undesirables and called them into the sacred space of your poems. Mm-hmm. And connected to the sacred in those most undesirables. For example, the woman on the subway train, right? Yeah. That was cut and everything. Right. That, for example, that's one of those moments. But what it sounds like to me now, after hearing that story, is that in that moment and along this journey, you have been so empowered to know your own sacredness and your own preciousness that now you can connect to it in damn near anybody or anything you see. Right. And that was what I was picking up in the poems. At first, I thought it was simple, like, okay, he doesn't want the forgotten ones to be forgotten, right? So he's reminding us of them, but it's more than that, because you connect to the sacredness in that. Hold on one second, because I want you to read that poem. Yeah. Would you read that one? Yeah. I read that one. So this comes from the Subway Chronicles sections. And so just for context, when I was working on this collection, I was doing a lot of riding on the trains. And so in New York, some of this I was actually commuting, going back and forth to Connecticut, because I teach in Connecticut. So I'm on the train, either Metro North or either the subway in New York. And so I love to people watch. For me, that's sort of a great place to sort of write. And I do that from time to time. So anyway, 289128 subway, this is Port in New York, Subway Chronicles, Section 3, A Lesson in Humanity After Leaving the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Having left the Met's rooftop overlooking Central Park East, awestruck by birches and blossoms, at 86 we board the B to Brighton Beach, downtown. A lady enters at 59th, razor slashes denting her frail cheeks, and begins. I don't want to sell my body, for it is an instrument. Her pupils sing violent fury, gun against temple, knife perpendicular to throat. Help is the last pleading word Miss Plaid Skirt ignores before exiting at Times Square. All I could write on that page was wow at the end, because it was so vivid to me, and I've seen it so many times, but that's what I mean. That's what I mean. So many people would have looked at that woman and seen so many other things, or would not have seen her at all. You looked at her and saw the sacred. I don't want to sell my body, because basically it's a temple. Right? She's saying, I know my body is a temple, and this temple is being abused. And you were able to see it. And I think it's also interesting that you are a man and you could see that, right? Perhaps other women might see that or feel it and run away from it, but you chose to look at it face to face. Yeah. And that's what I mean about being anointed with your own sacredness and preciousness, to the point where you can enact that or draw that or connect to that in other things. I want to just let people know who might be watching. The book is divided into 3 sections. Property of the State is the first section. Poet in Residence, Cell 23 is the second. And then Poet in New York is the third section. And I do want you to read the first piece in that section.
289128, Poet in New York. Remember, do not turn from the difficult thesis. Think back to the slim praying man in cell 15 with needles stuck in vein. Religion or dope can stop time. Remember 72 in the unit built for 30, that never-ending revolving door, or the overcrowded choir singing, I am the wretched of the earth. Typed on a Smith Corona at night, how cell 23 demanded rabble art. What about the couple in cell 22, lifeless who found love doing the bid? Father and son, his cellies on the top tier, no generation will be left behind. Too many bodies lingering in limbo, the worn out illusion of truth see. Memorialized faces you will forget. Victim turned perpetrator in cell 6, sold at age 8 for a bag of meth. Nothing is black and white.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. So before you left, did you have people that ask you to write about them, or do they know that you've written about them or know the connection? I'm just curious.
Not at all.
Wow.
No, I think about that all the time. And I just wrote a piece. I just wrote a piece about for an anthology or something about prison. And I tend to go back to some of these characters in here and to sort of like prove points, and especially the ones who taught me something. But yeah, they don't know, which is an interesting thing within itself. But they taught me a whole lot. You know, I went back to this to the county jail that I was originally sentenced at once and did a workshop. But those guys weren't there. That wasn't the prison that I was in, so that wouldn't have been them. But no, they don't. But I feel a sense that I need to talk about them all the time. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, when I'm working, especially if I'm writing something about this, like they have to come up. And sometimes in lessons, I'm trying to sort of even teach the reader or myself. That I've learned while dealing with some of these people on the inside, some of these men that I broke bread with, you know, for years. And now we don't even, you know, I don't know where they are in the world. So, which I find is kind of interesting itself, within itself. So they have a life. They have a life within my life. And I don't even think they know how much they impacted that. You know?
And they also have a life within our lives, anybody who reads the book.
Right, exactly.
You know, because your poetry is so powerful that it leaves that imprint. It leaves it, so they go on. So, okay, I'm gonna go ahead on and nut up a little bit, just a little bit, right? I gotta have you read Ars Poetica, Art is Propaganda. So we're gonna go all the way back to full circle. So okay. Just to, you know, remind folks of what we talked about when we first started talking. The first poem that I asked Randall to read was Sorry, This Not That Poem, right? Right. So we're going to end it with this one because this is that poem, all right? For lack of better words, this is that poem. Go ahead, go ahead.
Right, 289128, Poet in New York, Ars Poetica 1, Art is Propaganda. Forget about revisionist history of the body. Say xenophobia, but say it backwards. Not plainly to the wholly ignorant, this be not a test. Extract ignorant from the alphabet, take back the illegal naming of things. Take back natives trying to love pilgrims pulled up by a helping hand. Take back murderers who invented whiteness. I am not post or post-racial or post-human. I am color constructed 289128 and you can't take it back. I am melanin. And perhaps we have lost our minds. Some laws are cold bullshit and poems need to bite. Spit venom, rubber rouse, say motherfuck that. Rapid fire like machine guns into the absurd. Question, where is the Baraka of this generation? Fuck a law. Motherfuck the state. Fuck beneficiaries from plantations. Okay, say illegal now. Perhaps iron will be a cold bitch. Invert madness. Rat-a-tap-tap someone with love from a bullet. Who dares to gain privilege? Say you must be crazy while digging a good foot out somebody's ass.
So that's the poet that Randall Horton is. For those who are not familiar with an Ars Poetica, he's talking about what his poetry does. And that idea of, to me, that poem is, like the ugly beautiful.
Right, yeah.
Ugly beautiful. That's the real ugly beautiful. Instead of trying to describe the ugly with trees and flowers and all of that other stuff, this is the real ugly beautiful for so many people.
Right. Sometimes.
So many people. And so many people who may have never experienced that kind of incarceration, but there's all kinds of incarceration and imprisonment in that particular poem that is being described.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no.
Because that's so many of us.
Right. And I think for me, I mean, that's totally inspired by, I guess, Barak in a lot of ways, thinking about, the purpose of language, the purpose of the poet. And I guess coming out of the, Chicago State experience with, from my mentors, Sterling Plump and Haki, and Haki Madhubuti, and, thinking about the purpose of a poem and like what it is a poem's supposed to do, really, like, okay, what is it for? And sometimes, it's like Du Bois said, art is propaganda, right? So we have to embrace that and not try to go for some higher, some kind of transcendental moment, when, like you say, fuck a law, motherfuck, you got to, sometimes you have to be plain and clear in the midst of all of that beauty, in the midst of all that beauty, to get at the heart of what's really happening, right? So I like imagery. I love, language that sings, but also like that thing that goes like a dagger through the heart too. You know what I mean? So I think when you get the best of both of those worlds, that's when you're really poeting sometimes, I think. Yeah.
All right. That sounds like a closing. There's sometimes when you just hear that last word and we need to stay on that last note, about the dagger.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say before we close?
No, I just want to thank you for having me on here and being able to talk shop to an old poet friend now, right? We've been at it for a minute. And these are the best conversations, I think, when you really get it to like when I was a younger poet, these are the conversations I was like holding on to as I was trying to figure out my way. And I think these are very important. I look at our lives, but I look, maybe look at some other young poet's life who's trying to figure out, a way to sort of write and do their thing. And hell, we're all still figuring it out. Make no mistake.
Every day. That's right.
Right. No, we're still all trying to figure it out. But I think it helps, when you have community, you have like-minded people to run things by and just sort of like help you realize, whatever it is you're trying to get at. And it just seems like, we've come full circle in terms of like me doing Warpland to where we are now. And so I kind of dig that. That's what I got into this whole thing for, was sort of like to have those literary relationships and sort of like to grow as a person and as a human being, right? So I thank you.
Thank you for being here. So for those of you who don't know, Randall Horton is a superstar on a whole bunch of levels, as well as a superhero as far as I'm concerned. And so I want to say thank you again. And one of the things that I have to say that I love about this platform and the people that I have on is that these conversations are not just for poets, but they're for everyday people. because there are plenty of young people as well as older adults who are looking for some kind of inspiration, motivation, who are locked up sometimes within their own minds, if no place else. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That are needing something sacred to hold on to so that
exactly.
they don't feel invisible. And so try a poem, try a poem. Even if you don't write poetry, there is something
Yeah,
sacred. You
it
can
is. I
find something
mean,
sacred there.
yeah, you don't have to, no one's, you don't know what, if you don't know what poetry is going to take you or what you're going to be or what you're going to do. The perfect example is a group of young men that I was blessed to be a part of their existence at Mount McGregor Correctional Facility upstate New York, through a friend of mine named Kara Benson. Real quick, and so she basically it was a creative writing program, and so they invited me to come do a workshop with them once a month. I got to know these guys over like a 3-year period. And when and so to a man, each one of them that got out of prison that was in their program, they've done wonders with their lives. I keep in touch with every last. I wrote a piece in my next memoir comes out. It's called "Can Poetry Save a Life?" And it actually talks about that workshop and those people that's in there. And every last one, we're friends. Like I like one of them now, Sean. Del Piaz is a really great friend of mine. He's out. He got an MBA now, and he's sort of doing these homeless projects. I mean, these home projects for the homeless. He's like they're doing it, and so they're not necessarily writers. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But they wrote, and they read, and they participated, and they studied, and they thought, and they talked about art and literature. And it changed them in some kind of way. To a person, like it's the most interesting thing. I'm counting 5 right now.
Okay, so wait. So what happened was poetry took them on a journey, and they did not turn their backs on the journey.
There you go.
Right? It was a calling.
There you go.
It was a calling. And I thank you for sharing that example. Because I think a lot of people think that when I say these kinds of things, it's just because I'm a poet or just because I'm a writer, and it's not. It's not. I've seen those moments where a poem has moved somebody to tears, where somebody found some kind of kinship as a result of a piece.
Exactly.
And I think it's critically important for right now, because a lot of people don't read it all, or they don't have a lot of time, or they can't sit down, and you can discover a whole new world or universe as well as a part of yourself in a very, very short poem, So thank you for sharing that example, because it's real. It's really, really real.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
And, thank you for taking your time. I know how highly in demand you are and all of that good stuff with all that you do. So I'm very humbled. And it was wonderful to get to listen to you and to hear the stories and to be so open to share your journey, because so many people need to hear that inspiration.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, thank you for watching. And if you have seen this video and like what you see, we hope that you subscribe, that you like, that you comment, that you share, that you show the poets and show the poetry some love, and that you consider poetry as a daily inspiration and motivation, because it just might keep you going or send you another further. And sometimes it just might save your life.